Hello listeners, we are your co-hosts Jeanine Bailey and Marie Quigley for the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. Empower World brings guests who are making a difference to the world to inspire coaches and leaders who lead with mind, heart and soul. Hello and welcome listeners to the next episode of the Empower World Coaching and Leadership Podcast. And today I'm very delighted to be in the same Zoom room as my business partner, Marie Quigley. Marie, welcome. It's been so long since we've done one together.
In a while. You've been traveling the world and lots of things have been happening, and to finally come together to record some work together is wonderful. And I've loved listening to the podcast that we've done individually with our wonderful guests as well. There's been some fabulous, thought-provoking episodes that we've done. So great to be with you.
Yes, and I know you've been busy too, Marie. So it's, again, wonderful to be here, even though we are on the opposite sides of the world at the moment. You experiencing summer and me winter again in Australia. So, but happy to be here. It was my mum's 90th birthday celebration, so it was very important to be here.
Absolutely. Happy birthday, Mum.
Thank you. I will pass that on. And so, Marie, you and I, we had a little bit of a discussion to work out what we'd focus on today. And what we thought we would do is, based on what we've been experiencing, particularly as mentors of other coaches and assessors of coaches as well, and just hearing what we hear in relation to competency 3, establishes and maintains agreements. And we know that this competency can be a little bit of a stumbling block because, again, it is like no other conversation. These coaching conversations are like no other. And we are certainly listening out and supporting our coaches to meet the markers of competency 3. And there are 4. And it's interesting to hear how they can often be misunderstood or perhaps a little bit out of kilter. So we wanted to have a conversation to support coaches to be able to meet that competency in a powerful way.
Yeah, agree. And of course, competency 3, establish and maintains agreements, also relates to the contract, to the written contract part, or the 3-way conversations that you would have with organizations. But what we really want to focus on today is what happens in maintaining the agreement of the coaching session. That's what we want to focus on, to deepen your awareness, not to just make it a tick box of hitting competency 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4, but to really understand how you can naturally and easily bring these competencies alive. And by doing that, automatically the assessors will be able to hear those competencies in action.
So true, Marie. And thank you for getting more specific in relation to what we want to focus on. And I was mentoring a coach last week or so, and this coach she's done thousands of hours of coaching. So I know she's a fabulous coach, and she hadn't been mentored for quite some time, and requires this mentoring to be able to maintain her credential. And she had a belief that she's got to tick those boxes and doesn't want to. Of course, she wants to be natural. She wants to flow with her client, but had this very firm belief that I've got to tick all of these boxes in a row, and I can't do it. And so obviously we had a conversation about this, and in the end, she asked me to coach her. And so I So I did. And the competency, which is marker 3.3, I'll just read it here in front of me. Coach inquires about or explores what is important and or meaningful to the client about what they want to accomplish in this session. This is something that she really felt she could not ask of her clients, who were very much more in their head. So I asked her essentially, what did she want to focus on in our session that we had, very brief session. And so I heard what she shared. I reflected back what I noticed, not just the words, but also what was coming up for her. I can't remember now, perhaps emotionally or somatically. And then I asked her, so what's important about this, I'll say topic, but I didn't use that word, topic that you brought in today? And that was just her opportunity to be able to release what was happening for her. It was so powerful for her to be able to release her emotions, the things that were potentially that she was holding on to about meeting the competencies. So it was very, very powerful. And as I said to her post the coaching, I didn't follow all the markers. I didn't follow them in any particular order, except I asked those two particular marker type questions to support you with what was coming in. And that would be enough to be able to meet the PCC markers. So I've spoken a lot. So handing back over to you, Marie, based on what I've shared.
Thank you for sharing. And just thinking that's a very simple, practical example for coaches to think about. How do you, when a client comes with the focus of the session, how do you support them to understand why on earth are they even bringing it here? What is meaningful to them about this topic? If we forget to ask that question, or a type of question like that, we could be missing a whole bunch of information, which is what you've explained, Jeanine, that your client, as you said, holding on to the emotions, the frustrations, why on earth would we bring this conversation to coaching? That helps us get a deeper goal, which then allows us to look at when they leave here, what's going to be different if we spend time having this conversation. What does success look like for us to have this conversation when and it also helps us to recontract or determine when things need to shift, when a client determines that things need to shift in the conversation, because we've gotten really clear about why on earth we're talking about this.
I believe it's a really powerful question to ask, in your own words, of course, but something like, so this topic that you brought in, what's important about it? It does lead to the client to be able to, the reflective partner to be able to go underneath the story of what they have shared and really ask themselves, why have I brought this in? What's really the driver? What's going on underneath that is creating that symptom of what I brought in to the session initially? And I will share that often with the coaches that I mentor, that question 3, and it meets marker 3.3. What's important about why you've brought this into the session? It then supports the coach to be able to partner with the client, the reflective partner, to identify a deeper goal for the session. And of course, we can add to that question of what's important about this to support our client with, so what needs to be really explored today? And again, that can just help funnel the client's focus to, again, something that's deeper. and agree a deeper goal for the session instead of accepting the surface thing that pops up initially in the conversation.
Absolutely. And so, coaches, you can hear that this process of establishing and developing and deepening the awareness of the goal and helping the client what they want to look to understand or get clear about what they want to walk away with. And why on earth is this important to them? This takes time. It's not done in the first minute of the session. And that's also what I'm hearing is the goal. It comes along very quickly. The coach accepts this is the goal, but actually they haven't taken it. I'm moving my arms downwards, taken it inside, explored what's really going on for the client, looked at the emotions that might be triggered for this, looked at the values, the purpose, the meaning behind why this is a challenge or an opportunity for learning here. So it's about taking time to explore this. That is part of the coaching process. There's a lot of learning that happens for the client when you are unpacking this process of maintaining agreements. There's just so much information. And sometimes it's so powerful, you could actually stop coaching once you've determined that focus, that deeper focus, because there can be profound lessons that are learned in that process. And if you do this and say, so what are you learning about yourself now? Already there's so much information that the client can gain for raising their own awareness.
Yeah, it's a really powerful point, Marie. And I believe, I'm making this up, that potentially, and again, I'm making an assumption here, that perhaps newer coaches feel that perhaps I've got to establish the goal really quickly because it's not coaching. And then we'll be able to do the deeper work. And what you're saying and what I also believe is, and what I know that we both consider when we're establishing the goal, we are coaching the client. We are supporting them to, I'm using the word and moving my hands, funneling down to what's most important. And I don't know how many clients I've worked with where, that initial piece of partnering with the client to really identify what it is they want to work on can be so powerful, freeing. And I'm thinking of my own personal recording that I did for MCC purposes many years ago. And I know that with that particular client, we did spend a lot of time in looking at establishing the goal. And the client, she was so elated and ecstatic in terms of where she was when I asked her, once we looked at the evidence of success for the session, and I asked her, where would you like to explore now? She said, I really want to keep continuing to explore success. And so that's what we did. We continued to keep looking at success out into the future. So it was a really joyful and powerful coaching session. So, it really didn't go into those potentially much more challenging, let's say, areas. It was still expanding her awareness. It was still supporting her to go beyond where she'd thought before, but it was a very joyful experience.
Sounds beautiful, Jeanine. Well done to you and your client for creating that experience together. And that can happen so often when we take the time to establish. It's more than a goal. It's so much more than a goal. The word goal doesn't feel adequate enough to describe what it is. When I've done demonstrations for other coaches about this, sometimes it can feel uncomfortable watching it. Because what happens is the client comes with something they say they want to work on. And because we think, well, there might be something underneath this. So are you willing to explore this? The coach who's observing thinks, well, they've already said that. And they've already said it, because I will often say, can you say that more succinctly? Can you use, would you be open to using different words to name that really resonates with you? And the coach that is observing thinks that we're asking the same thing. But with every shift of awareness that becomes deeper, the goal becomes clearer and more profound. And that's why it takes time. And that's why silence and curiosity is our best friend when we're really looking at the depth of the goal. And so if you feel uncomfortable with the amount of time you're taking to establish this, that is a good thing. So get used to the discomfort of letting the client be whatever is happening in the moment, the unfolding of the conversation, and still get curious about what's meaningful about this, because you'll see the goal shift. The goal will become potentially something different in the first 10, 15 minutes of the session.
So true. And I always encourage the coaches that I mentor to always hand it back. You at times you'll reflect back what you're hearing and then hand it back to the client to potentially, because we might have inserted our own words, and to ask them to share it in their words. I quite often hear coaches ask their client what they want to work on. They'll hear something and then they'll make up a goal for the client. And the client will say, yes, I think so. There'll be some sort of reservation. So I will always suggest to the coach, yes, you might summarize what you're hearing, but hand it back over to your client to say it in their words. And yes, they might be very verbose in terms of how they respond. So you can potentially then ask them to share the goal again, but in one sentence or one breath. So that eventually you really do funnel it down to a goal, an agreement that both of you remember. So that at any point in the session, when you're perhaps checking in to see if you're on track with the agreement or the goal, or at the end, you can say it with confidence, because the goal is very succinct. But that exchange and letting the client take ownership for the words that are used, as you say, Marie, it can support the client to go deeper. It can help them to reflect even deeper if you give them the space. So it's not about rushing the goal or the agreement. That is still, you are still coaching your client to reflect deeply on what it is they truly want.
Yeah. And that means as a coach, we are noticing what's happening as the client is defining their goal, what's happening in their breath, what's happening in their body language. We are still the mirrors of showing them who they are in this establishing the goal. That's why it's still very, 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 very much coaching. We're using our listening. We're listening to the system. We're listening to the client. We're listening to ourselves. We're asking curious questions. We're staying in the unknown. There's more silence there. So all of those skills that are beyond competency 3, you can hear them when you are establishing a deeper goal.
Hearing them, seeing them, feeling them, experiencing them, and supporting your client to become aware of those different ways that they communicate what's important to them. And so once you have worked with your client to establish that agreement, the goal for the session, that's when you want to bring in competency 3.2 or marker 3.2 and ask your client, what will be different at the end of this session, or what will be the evidence of success that lets you know that that agreement or goal has been met? And often coaches don't, perhaps because it's very different. It's not what we would typically ask in perhaps normal conversations, in inverted commas, normal conversations. It's a very different type of question, but it's so powerful. Like, it really can support your client to tap into what's important to them. Again, and it could be about energy. I'll feel lighter. I'll have more clarity. I will have a way forward, whatever it may be. And then you can ask systemic questions like, so if you have that clarity and you feel light and you've got an idea of the way forward, what does that open up for you? And that can support your client to get very invested in what it is they want to achieve in the session and beyond.
And sometimes coaches will say to me, how do you know when enough is enough, Marie? So we've seen you deepening the goal, and then suddenly the client says, that's it. That's an indicator. When the clients kind of resonates, when they know this is true, they will tell you, that's it. But it is a back and forth. Does that feel right? How does that land with you? If you say those words again, does anything need to shift? Does anything need to change? They will determine when it's right for them. You'll see it in the way their body moves. You'll see it in their face. It is a truth for them, if that makes sense. And so they know when it's enough. And you have to... This is the art and science of coaching, isn't it? You have to be in deep rapport with a client to be paying attention to that resonance so that then you know, okay, so this is really what you want to work on. And this is like so important to you. It's going to be life-changing for you in some kind of way and have this bigger ripple effect in the system. Now, let's have a look at this. What does this mean? What's holding you back? What's really going on here? What are all the beliefs that have stopped you from achieving this? And because they've created that profound awareness for themselves and it's resonated in all of themselves, then they know they want it. And then all of the excuses that they've had perhaps already have dropped away. So clients will sometimes say to me, do you know what, I don't know what the problem is anymore, because actually I've realized I really want this. So I don't need to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so just going back to what we were sharing earlier, the key is to let it unfold, to stay present, not rush, provide that space, notice what's going on for us, reflecting that back if you feel confident to do that, but certainly be that mirror for your client to let them know what we're hearing in all its various different senses, observing, hearing, experiencing, so that the client can create that deeper awareness. And it's incredible how powerfully our clients can tap into, as you said, Marie, their old stuff that they realize is no longer true. So it's an incredibly powerful process. And so once you have agreed on or have understood what will be the evidence of success, perhaps you've looked at systemic questions as well to ramp that up even more, then you can simply hand it back to your client and ask them, where would you like to explore now? They know their world. And that is partnering, and that is trusting our clients are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole.
I think that's a beautiful place to end, Jeanine.
Me too. I think we've shared a lot of our thoughts, insights, and experience in relation to competency 3. So, coaches, we'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your questions that you might have around competency 3, because we know that it's it's not straightforward. And yet when we embody these competencies and don't see it as a tick box exercise, that actually they're here for a purpose. They're here to be able to really create powerful outcomes and experiences. We trust that that's what will happen for your clients.
Yeah. So the competencies are not here to keep us in a box. They're here to set us free and do brilliant work. So let's embody them, and that will make the difference. Thank you for listening. Thanks for listening. You can find out more about us
on our website, www.empower-world.com, and on our social media networks, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Be empowered.